In my previous tutorials, you have seen how to create a Spring Boot project from scratch, as well as how to create a REST controller and all the HTTP methods. Today we'll see how to handle exception in Spring Boot REST and how to create a custom exception and everything. Okay, so I'll be starting from scratch. I mean to say, creating this new Spring Boot project and new REST controller. If you have gone through my previous videos already, you just skip to the point where I start handling the exceptions. Okay, let's start. So I'll be creating a new Spring project, Spring Starter project. Click on next and we'll wait until it loads. Okay, so I'll be naming it as student API 1. As I have already student API here, I'll change it to student API 1 and Java version is 8 and packaging is jar. Okay, I'll just click next. And as of now, for exception handling, we need only Spring Web and Spring Boot Dev Tools. I've explained you the use of Spring Boot Dev Tools in my previous videos. Please go through it if you haven't already. Okay, so as you can see in my progress bar, the Maven is creating a project. It is adding the required libraries and everything automatically. Okay, so student API 1 is our project, and as you can see, the project structure got changed and everything you can see in the pom.xml, the dependencies which are added. As of now, we have added Spring Boot tools and Spring Boot Starter web. Okay, so I'm not going to go in detail about this. So let us go ahead and start one controller, which is student controller. And we will annotate the student controller with @ REST controller. I'll just type in Ctrl+Shift+O, which will automatically import the required libraries. Okay, now our student controller is ready. I'll write one test method just to test the application. Public string welcome, which returns welcome to my student API, and I'll mark it with git mapping. Okay, now we are done. I'm saving and just run this application. Before I run, I change the port to 8090 because in my all other application I do the same. Server dot port is equal to 8090. Okay, I'll just save this. Let us run the application. Okay, now the application is started on the port 8090, as you can see here. So we'll go to the browser. As you can see, when I hit enter, it returns welcome to my student API. So this means our API is working fine. Okay, so let us start writing different methods. So we'll be doing CRUD operations. What we'll do, public maybe string get all students. So basically we need one Pojo object, an entity to return. So what we'll do, we'll create one entity called student, new class student, just a Pojo object. Click on finish. We'll have a few variables here. Just expand this. I'll say private int id, private string first name, private string last name, private int age, private string email id. Okay, for this let us go ahead and generate constructor and set a getter method. So the shortcut is control shift s, sorry, it is alt shift and s. So we'll say generate a constructor using fields. We'll select all the constructors, generate, and we'll have default constructor. These are all parameterized constructor. We'll have default constructor in case, and we'll write setter method and get a message alt shift and s. Okay, generate, get us, and set us. We'll select all, we'll say generate. Okay, now we have our student Pojo ready. Let us go ahead and write our method. As of now, we'll just stop the server until we write the methods. Okay, I'll just stop the server. So it's get all students. Basically, we'll be returning the list of all student object. Okay, so this is java dot util dot list. Okay, we'll import that. So get all student. As of now, I'll not be using any database. So I'll be creating one simple array list of students. Okay, and in the constructor, I'll just add few values to it. A public constructor students is equal to new student of. Okay, I'll add few values to this. Sorry, new array list of, my bad, new array list of students, sorry, student. Okay, we'll be creating this, and we'll add few more values. I have already in my notepad copied, so I'll just copy this and paste it here. So as you can see, I've done it already. So I've added around 5 students with the first name, last name, age, and email ID. Okay, so we'll just return this, return students. So before this, we need to add get mapping. Okay, and what we'll do, the URI would be probably /students. When I hit students, it should return all the values inside this in JSON format. Okay, that's it. We'll save this and we'll run the application. Let's see how it works. Run as Spring Boot app. Okay, now our server is started. Let us go ahead in the browser and type in 8090. It says welcome to my student API. When I hit students, so it is listing me all the students we have added inside this list. Okay, great. So how to format this and JSON, how to format this JSON and all I've explained in my previous video, so just go through it once. Okay, let's go ahead and write another method like get student by ID, something like that. Okay, let's see. Public, which will return student object. I'll say get student by ID. Okay, so I need to get the ID, which is integer ID. I'll mark it with get mapping. So I'll say student. And we need to get ID from the path. I'll mention id, and also here I'll say at the rate of path variable, right? Okay, so now in this, what happens is, if the user pass id as 2, I have to iterate through this list and find 2 and return the same student object to the user. Okay, there are two ways to do it. One way is older way, which is iterate through the list and get that student and return it to the user, and the second way is using streams. Okay, I'll show you both the ways. Let us go ahead and start with by using streams. I'll say student stu is equal to students.stream.filter this based on, let's say, student. If the past id double equals to student dot get id, so find the first element. I'll just write it in second line. Dot find first. Okay, if it is found, I'll say dot get, probably it will get me the student. Okay, or you can, what you can do is just return it directly. If it is there, it will return. Otherwise, what we have to do, or what we can do directly here is, or else throw some exception, existing exception I'll throw. Probably the syntax is like this: hyphen new illegal state exception, something like this, with a message requested okay, requested record not found. Okay, so basically what it does is, this is using streams, uh, students.stream, and it will filter the student based on the id, and then if it find anything, then it will return that student, otherwise it will return illegal state exception. Okay, so what we'll do, I'll just save this. So let the server load. Now the server is loaded. Let us go back to our postman, or we can directly come here and pass it something like student slash id. I'll say 1. If I hit enter, it will return the 1. I'll say probably 2. It will return 2. So I'll say 100, which is not there in our list as of now. If I hit enter, it will say illegal state exception, requested record not found, which is basically, that is what we are throwing it here. So this is one way to do it. So I'll show you the other way. I'll just comment this part, the old way. So what we can do is, student stu is equal to null. We'll do for each student colon students. Okay, and we'll find if student dot get id double equals to the id which is passed from front end. If it is equal, then what I'll do, I'll assign stu is equal to student, and I'll just break. If it is found, I no need to go to the next field. I mean to say, for example, if you pass 2 from the front end or from the request, so first it will go through this. ID1 it is not matched, ID2 it is matched, so it will get this student object. The iterator need not have to go to next 3 to check, as we have already found this in the second place. Okay, that is what I have done. I'll assign it to stu, and after this what I have to do is, if stu double equals to null, then I need to throw new legal state exception. I'll just put semicolon here, say student record not found, something like this. If it is not null, return student. Yeah, stu. Okay, so basically this and this whole code does the same. You can see from the code, this I have done it in only one line. This takes a lot of code. So if you are not familiar with this, just go with this. Okay, I'll just save this. So let the server restart. Server is restarted now, and I'll go back to the browser and say 5 is there, so it returns. I'll say 100. It is not there, it will throw student record not found. Okay, so this is the exception thrown to the user is not right way to do it. Basically it should say why this exception is and what this exception is and all other details. So it should be in the user readable format. Okay, this whoever is developing and who has knowledge on this exceptions, they can understand. But if any third party user, I mean to say someone who is not aware of these technical knowledges, if they call this URI, if they see this, it is difficult for them to understand. So what we'll do, we'll return the exception in JSON format with proper error message. Okay, let us go back here. So for this, what we'll do, we'll create one exception, normal class, student not found exception. So we'll do that. So let us stop the server. Student not found exception, and so this should extend runtime exception. So why I'm using runtime, sorry, there should be extends. Why we should use runtime, I'm using runtime exception is basically if you use exception, then you have to handle in throws or try catch block. We'll save that time as of now. So student not found exception extends runtime exception. What we need, so private timestamp. So basically it is from javasql.timestamp. So private string error code, private string error message. So whatever the fields you want, you can have it here. So as of now I'm using only the 3 basic fields. Okay, as usual, Alt Shift S, I'll write a constructor. So basically we don't need timestamp because we need not have to pass it from front end. So in this, what I'll do is this dot timestamp is equal to new timestamp. I know it is not right way to do it, but for the development purpose it is fine as of now. New timestamp of new date of get time. So this will do. Okay, timestamp, I'm just hard coding it. Whenever we run the application, whenever the exception occurs, it will take that timestamp. Rest of the things we have to pass it from front end. Okay, I'll just put it doesn't get us. Okay, fine. We are ready with student not found exception. So what we'll do, if user finds any student, if it is not found, what I'll do, I'll throw student not found exception. First one is error code and second one is error message. Okay, fine. So error code is not found, something like this, and in the student not found exception will propagate the same error message to the super. Okay, say if I don't do this, I'll just leave it as it is. I'll show you what happens. So as of now, if student is not found, we are showing custom exception, student not found exception, with the code not found and the message student record not found. Okay, I'll just save this and I'll just run it, run as Spring Boot app. Okay, great. Now it is running. I'll just go to the browser. File. It says yes, it is found. I'll say 500 now. Now, as you can see, it is throwing not illegal state exception, which is throwing student not found exception. This is a custom exception we have designed, and it says no message available. That is why, because we have not propagated the message to the runtime exception. So when I say super, it will call the runtime exception default constructor. So if I say super of error message, okay, if I click, and what I'll do, I'll just stop the server first, and I'll just control click on super. What it will do, it will call runtime exception with a super message. Okay, so whatever the message we say, it will be displayed. So I'm just propagating it to the parent. Okay, let us go here. Now let us start the server. So now the server is up. Let us go ahead in the browser. I'll say 10. So as you can see, student record not found. 10 is also not found. So basically we have only till 5. So now I'm saying 10. It says student record not found, which is the message we have passed here. When I click on it, it will go to the constructor. In the constructor, the same error message we are propagating to the parent. Still, this is not right way to do it, because this is not what we are expecting. We are expecting the error or the exception in JSON format. Okay, let's go ahead and achieve that. So there are two ways you can handle this exception. So I mean to say, you can give the response in JSON format, in the proper format. So what I can do here is, so instead of throwing a new student not found exception, I'll just comment this out. What I'll do, I'll just return the response entity. What I'll do, I'll create one more entity called error response. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just stop the server first, hit enter. Okay, so I'll just copy paste the same whatever we have here. I'll tell you why. So now we have super. I'll just remove this because we are not, please note this point, we are not extending the runtime exception. We are just creating one pojo with a timestamp, error code, error message, and everything. Okay, I'll just save this. What I'll do, instead of throwing a student not found exception, what I'll do here is I'll create one response entity. Basically, response entity, what it does is, whatever the pojo object we send, it will convert it into the JSON format, or yeah, it will convert it into JSON format. What I'll do, instead of this, I'll say response entity of I'll just say question mark. I can pass with either student object or error response based on the results. Okay, what I'll do here, if the student is null, then I'll create one error response object, error response error rest is equal to new error response. I need to pass the error code. I'll say not found. Okay, and error message is same thing. I'll pass, say student record not found. Okay, this error response, I'll return it as entity. So I'll say return new response entity of, this should be error response. Okay, so it should be error response, and we have to pass this error response object and http status dot not found maybe. Okay, if the record is not found, I'll pass this. If the record is found, what I'll do, I'll just copy paste the same, return. So if the record is found, I'll be returning student object rather than error response. So I'll just change it to student object, and error response, instead of this I'll say stu. HTTP method would be, HTTP status would be okay. Great. Let us see how the exception is handled now. I'll just say run Spring Boot app. Okay, great. Now it is running. We'll go to the browser. I'll say 1. So there is nothing, no change at all. It will return 1. If I say 100, this record is not found in our database. Now you see timestamp, error code, and the error message. So now this is in JSON format and more readable format. So this is what we are returning here. This is the error response. Okay. So yeah, fine. So now, so as you can see, sorry, I'll show you that as well. The error response contains timestamp, error code, error message. As you can see in the result, timestamp, error code, and error message. So let us go back. So this is one way to handle the exception. So, and another way is to handle it globally. So why to handle it globally? I'll show you. So now what we'll do is, now we have used get mapping. What I'll do, get student by ID. So if it is not found, it will throw exception. Now what I'll do, I'll just write another method. Okay, say remove public. So what I'll do is, I'll return the list of student. I'll tell you why I'm using list here. Sorry, pardon, student. Okay, probably remove student. This is our method. We're going to remove the student from the list. So if you're removing, just use delete mapping. I'll have to say remove student, and I have to pass the ID, which ID you want to remove. So as usual, we have to use @ path variable, say int ID. So before removing, normally we have to check whether that record exists in the database, or in this case list, or not. So what we'll do, we'll copy the same code. Okay, just copy paste. Now what we are doing, we are iterating over the students, and if it is found, then we'll assign it to the student object. If student is equal to null, then I'll throw an exception. Error response would be student not found. So this response entity is giving error because to handle list there is a different way to handle the list. As of now we are giving only the response as error response or the student. We are not returning a list. So I'll show you in my subsequent tutorials how to handle the list in these cases. As of now, I'll just change the return type to student. Okay, so yeah, so if it is found, then return. If it is not found, then throw an error. Otherwise, return the response entity. Okay, this should be response entity. This should not be student. As I have shown earlier, it should be question mark or because yeah. So in this case, what I'll do, it is same as get student by ID. It is same as it, but first we'll check whether that student is there. If student is not there, then I have to throw an exception. Otherwise, we have to remove it from the list. Okay, what I'll do, students, which is my list, students dot remove. I'll have to pass the object. Which object? Stu, because it is found. I'm removing it from the list. Okay, and I'm passing the removed student and say HTTPS. Okay, let us see how it works before we go in depth what I've done. Okay, just now I saved it and this server reloads. We'll go back to the browser. So we'll see list of students first, students. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. What I'll do, I will just say remove student /1, hit enter. It says, so sorry, and one more thing, this one is not a get mapping, this is delete mapping. This is not a get request, as I specified here, delete mapping. So basically in this case I have to go to the postman, or how to use the postman and all I've shown in my previous tutorials. Go through it and we'll do delete mapping. I've already written the request, 8090 remove student 100. So before 100 I'll say 1. As you can see, ID is 1, and we'll request for get all students. As you can see from the list, 1 is removed and we are left with 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, we'll go back to the remove student and we'll say 100, which is not there in our list. So when you hit enter, then what happens, it will throw me an error saying student record not found. I'm trying to remove the student which is not there in our database, so it says student record not found. That is what we have done it here. So yeah, this is good. Somehow we are doing it. We are throwing the user defined error response in the JSON format to the user. Now if you can see here, this particular set of code is duplicated here. So wherever you want to say student not found exception or any other exception you want to throw, then this particular set of code is duplicated. So to avoid this, what they have done is they have provided with one more case like global exception handler. I mean to say all the exception will be handled in one place rather than handling it in each methods. Okay, let's say global exception handler. I'll just create one class called global exception handler. Let's stop the server. Okay, so basically what I'll do here is I'll mark it with controller advice. So when the Spring container sees this controller advice, it will come here and it will look for what is being handled. It doesn't mean this controller advice only handle the exception. It will handle few of the other types as well. So one of the thing is exception. Let us see if it is mentioned here. Okay, as you can see, exception handler is one of the thing which is handled here using at controller advice and init binder model attribute. Few of the other things are handled if you use @controller advice. So one of them is exception handler. So it will come here and look for whatever we have advised to the Spring container to handle. So what we'll do, we'll write one public response entity. I'll say error response, whichever we have done. Error response. I'll say handle student not found exception. Okay, this is the method name, and I'll pass student not found exception here. And what I'll do, if the student not found exception is thrown from anywhere from the student API application, then what I'll do, I'll create one error response is equal to new error response of error code would be not found, and we'll copy the same message in from the student controller. Okay, student record not found, student record not found. I'll say semicolon, and the next thing would be returning the response entity. Return response entity of, will not say error response, let's remove this, I'll leave it blank, of error resp, and the status message, it will be always http status dot not found. Okay, so I'll just say question mark here. What did I miss? Response entity, probably I'll say new error response entity. Okay, error response be error resp. Okay, so student error response and not found, http not found, we can use error response here as well. So yeah, I'll just remove it and put it out. Yeah, when I say so wherever this exception, student not found exception is thrown, then it will come to this block and it will return this error response. It says not found and student not found, student record not found message. Okay, so what I'll do for that, we have to mark this with @exception handler, and what type of exception this is handling, I have to say, or probably this value is equal to, I'll say student not found exception dot class. So basically what it does is, if I throw student not found exception from anywhere in the application, it will come here and it will return the response like this. Let us see how does it work. Okay, this is a global exception handler. Why I'm saying this global exception handler is because if you go to student controller, we are throwing student not found exception from get student by ID, as well as remove student. What I'll do, if it is not found, okay, I'll just say throw new student not found exception. So we no need to do anything here. What it says, add argument. I think student not found exception does not have the default constructor. We'll add the, okay, as we are handling all these things in error response, we'll remove this completely. Okay, that's it, nothing is needed. Runtime student found not found exception extends runtime exception. Go back to student controller, just click on save. The same way, what we'll do, throw new student not found exception here. This we have handled it in, remember this we have handled it in global exception handler. So I'll just remove this. I'll say throw new student not found exception. Now we are done with everything. We'll just say run as Spring Boot app. Okay, fair enough, and we'll go back. So we'll say students. So every time the server is restarting, the list is getting created newly. So that's why you're seeing all the records. So students, now what I'll do, student, I'll search for 1. It will return. If I say 100, see what is saying, student not found. This is handled globally rather than handling in each method. So when I say throw new student not found exception, it will go to the global exception handler. We have marked it with at controller advice. So and we have marked it with exception handler. So when I say controller advice, it will come here, it will see. So any of the things it can be handled. So yes, exception handler can be handled. So it will come here, student not found exception, which is handled in this way. Okay, we'll go back to student controller and we'll try for remove student. Okay, I'll just say remove student. Okay, sorry, again I'm doing the same mistake. Remove student is a delete mapping which cannot be done from here. We'll be doing it from Postman. Okay, remove student, I'll say 1. It says 1 is removed and it says HTTP status OK. Here you can see status HTTP 200 OK. If you go back to get all students and just type in send, 1 is removed here. Again, go back to remove student, and if you say 100, observe here 200 will be changed to 404 not found, and it will say not found. Okay, so this is, I mean, there's a difference between handling it locally here or you are here, or you handle it globally using global exception handler. So yeah, so we have delete mapping and get mapping, and I can write the post mapping as well. It is same as this. You can handle the exception there only, and say if you want to handle the global exception, say now you have student not found exception, and you can say you have another course, something like that course which is not there. So what you can do, you can write you can just copy paste this and say write one more class called course not found exception, and let it extend runtime exception. And when the course is not found, you throw the, from the controller you throw new course not found exception, and go back to global exception handler. You write it here like not found exception, something like this, and You no need to pass it here. Simply I passed it. You can remove this as well. Nothing will happen unless you have something to pass here. So yeah, that is one good example. Yeah, like you can say course not found exception here, and you can have a something like that, course not found, course record not found, something like this. You can write it here. So one more thing here is student not found exception. Basically what you can do is you can, so what if you want to print something like this, student plus, I'll say id colon, say plus something like exception, probably something like, sorry, id. I want to do like this, student id, this id record not found, something. If you want to do something like this, what you can do is in student exception, probably you write one method, one variable, something like this, private int id will have constructors, and probably set a get for method for this data send setters. Okay, so we'll have okay default constructor. So I'll just save this, and when I'm throwing student record not found exception, I'll just pass the id here, whichever is not found, and we'll remove as well as this one. Okay, I'm passing here. So when you come to global exception handler, so that's fine. Here exception dot get id, so something like that. Probably this is not the right way to do it, but just try it out. I just save this. We'll go back to browser. I'll say student /1 as it is found, student /100. As you can see, student id 100 record not found. Okay, something like this you can do. And one more thing is you can have multiple, like not found exception dot class, like this. So multiple exceptions can be handled. As you can see, yeah, this is another way to handle the exception. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to tell you is, if you come back to the student controller, we have get mapping and delete mapping and global exception handler. Okay, so consider something happened. I mean, for example, some API error, or you're not able to connect to the API. Something happened other than the exceptions we have defined in this. So what we'll do, we'll accept whichever the exception is not handled here. We'll give a generalized response to that. To do that, what we'll do, we'll say instead of student not found exception, I'll say exception handled global exception, something like this. So probably this would be the exception. I'll not say not found, processing error, and say processing error, app processing error, please contact customer services. Okay, if any other exception is thrown, it will be handled here gracefully, and it instead of throwing an exception, I'll show you that. I'll just comment this out as of now. So what I'll do, from the student controller, consider if the student is found, if 2 dot get id double equals to 1, if it is 1, I'll just say throw new exception, runtime exception, something like this, or the exception whatever it is. Otherwise, return normal response. If the student have passed is 1, then it will throw the runtime exception. Okay, let's pass in the runtime exception here, just not for the confusion. Okay, I just save this runtime exception. You can pass the message, say processing error happened, something like this. Just save this. Now you can see here, so I've done it for git mapping. So I'll go back to the browser. Students say 2, it will return me the record 2. If I say 1, as you can see, processing error happened. This is a runtime exception we are throwing if the student is 1. Okay, to handle this part, what we'll do, we'll go to global exception and we'll uncomment this part. So if there is any runtime exception, something like this, if any runtime exception happened, you handle it gracefully. Let us go back and say student is equal to, which will return. If I say student is equal to 1, it will come here, and student found, it will come to this loop, and student.getId, if it is equal to 1, throw runtime exception. Okay, so now it will throw the runtime exception. Now in this case, it is handled gracefully. See, processing error, please contact customer services. Back. Okay, this is how it works. Okay, so you can handle multiple exceptions at one time. And one more thing is, so as student exception is handled already, you click on save. Let's go back. See, as you can see, it will say error creating with the handler exception resolver. Okay, so ambiguous exception handler method map for student not found exception. Okay, basically what it is saying is you have handled it already and you have handled it again. The same exception is handled it here. So just remove this and you're done. This is pretty much about the exception handling, and I'll show you. This is, we have seen creating a Spring Boot project and all the HTTP methods, and now we have seen the exception handling. So probably in my next tutorial I'll show you how to use, now the browser will show you in the JSON format how to pass this JSON format using a REST template, which means from another service or another API, you call this API and get the response in JSON format, and convert that JSON format into an entity. Say for example, from the another API you call student with the value 2. To that API you'll get, sorry, I think I've stopped the server. Anyway, I'll get the student object in JSON format, how to convert it into student object and use that entity. All those things I'll be explaining it to you in my subsequent tutorials. Probably it will be coming soon. So if you like this video, please subscribe and like this video. Thank you very much.